Henry McCarty, also better known as Billy the Kid, was a 19th-century American frontier outlaw and gunman who was a participant in the Lincoln County War. He was reputed to have killed 21 men, one for each year of his life. McCarty was 5 feet and 8 inches in height, had blue eyes, smooth cheeks, and prominent front teeth. He was said to be friendly and personable at times, but he could also be short-tempered and determined. This made him a very dangerous outlaw when combined with his shooting skills and cunning. He was also famous for apparently always wearing a sugarloaf sombrero hat with a white-green decorative band. He was little known in his own lifetime, but was catapulted into a legend in the year after his death, when his killer sheriff Pat Garrett published a widely sensationalistic biography of the outlaw called The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. Little is known about Henry McCarty's background, but he's thought to have been born on Allen Street in the mid-1990s, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan Island to Catherine McCarty. He was baptized on September 28, 1859, in the Church of St. Peter. His younger brother, Joseph McCarty, was born in 1863. His parents were of Irish Catholic descent. Following the death of her husband, Catherine McCarty and her sons moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, where she met William Henry Harrison Antrim. Faced with an indigent husband, McCarty's mother took in boarders in order to provide for her sons. She was afflicted with tuberculosis, even though she was seen by her boarders and neighbors as, quote by quote, a jolly Irish lady full of life and mischief. The following year, on September 16, 1874, his mother died. She's buried in the Memory Lane Cemetery in Silver City. At age 14, McCarty was taken in by a neighboring family who operated a hotel where he worked to pay for his keep. The manager was impressed by the youth, boasting that he was the only kid who could afford to live there. His schoolteacher said that the young orphan was no more of a problem than any other boy, always quite willing to help with chores around the schoolhouse. On September 23, 1875, McCarty was arrested for hiding a bundle of stolen clothes for a man playing a prank on a Chinese laundryman. 2 days after McCarty was thrown in jail, the scrawny teen escaped by worming his way up to the jailhouse chimney. From that point on, McCarty was more or less a fugitive. He eventually found work as an itinerant ranch hand and shepherd in southeastern Arizona. In 1877, he became a civilian teamster at Fort Grant Army Post in Arizona with the duty of hauling logs from a timber camp to a sawmill. The civilian blacksmith at the camp, Frank Windy Cahill, took pleasure in bullying young McCarty. At August 17th, Cahill attacked McCarty after a verbal exchange and threw him to the ground. McCarty retaliated by throwing his .45 pistol and shooting Cahill, who died the next day. Once again, McCarty was in custody, this time in the camp's guardhouse, awaiting the arrival of the local marshal. However, McCarty escaped before the marshal could arrive. Again on the run, McCarty had began to refer to himself as William Bonney. While on the run, an incident happened whereby an Apache group attacked McCarty and stole his horse, which forced him to walk many miles to the nearest settlement, which was Mrs. Jones' home. The family nursed the young man, who was near death, back to health. The Jones family developed a strong attachment to McCarty and gave him one of their horses. In the autumn of 1877, Bonney McCarty moved to Lincoln County, New Mexico, and was hired as a cattle guard by John Tunstall, an English cattle rancher, banker, and merchant, and his partner, Alexander McSween, a prominent lawyer. A conflict known later as the Lincoln County Cattle War had begun between the established town merchants and the ranchers. Events turned bloody on February 18, 1878, when Tunstall, unarmed, was caught on an open range while herding cattle. Tunstall's murder enraged Bonney and the other ranch hands. They formed their own group called the Regulators, led by ranch hand Richard Dick Brewer, and proceeded to hunt down 2 of the members of the posse that had killed Tunstall. They captured Bill Martin and Frank Baker on March 6th and killed them on March 9th. This occurred near Agua Negra. While returning to Lincoln, they also killed one of their own, a man named McCluskey, whom they suspected of being a traitor. On April 1st, Regulators Jim French, Frank McNabb, John Mattleton, Fred Waite, Henry Brown, and McCarty ambushed Sheriff William J. Brady and his deputy George Hittman, killing them both. McCarty was wounded while trying to retrieve a rifle belonging to him, taken from him by Sheriff Brady in an earlier arrest. On April 4th, they tracked down and killed an old buffalo hunter known as Buckshot Roberts, whom they suspected of being a traitor. Dick Brewer was killed and 2 other regulators were wounded during the gun battle, which took place at Blazer's Mill. McCarty took over as leader of the Regulators following Brewer's death. Under indictment for the Brady killing, McCarty and his gang spent the next several months in hiding and were trapped in Max Wine's home in Lincoln. After a 5-day siege, Max Wine's house was set on fire. McCarty and the other regulators fled, and Henry McCarty killed one of Brady's men in the process. Max Wine was shot down while fleeing the blaze, and his death essentially marked the end of the Lincoln County Cattle War. In the autumn of 1878, former Union Army General Lew Wallace became the new territorial governor of New Mexico. Wallace proclaimed an amnesty for any man involved in the Lincoln County War who was not already under indictment. McCarty, who had fled to Texas after escaping from Max Wine's house, was under indictment, but Wallace was intrigued by rumors that the young man was willing to surrender himself and testify against other combatants if amnesty could be extended to him. In March 1879, Wallace and McCarty met in Lincoln County at the home of Justice of the Peace Square, Willison, to discuss the possibility of a deal. True to form, McCarty greeted the governor with a revolver in one hand and a Winchester rifle in the other. McCarty was very careful. After taking several days to consider Wallace's offer, McCarty agreed to testify in return for amnesty. The arrangement called for McCarty to submit to a token arrest and a short stay in jail until the conclusion of his courtroom testimony. Although McCarty's testimony helped to indict John Dolan, the district attorney disregarded Wallace's order to set McCarty free after testifying. Instead, Billy was returned to jail in June 1879. McCarty was sentenced to 3 years in prison for murder. Following his imprisonment, McCarty turned to a life of crime, sustaining himself through cattle rustling, gambling, and murder. In January 1880, during a well-documented altercation, Billy the Kid killed a man named Joe Grant in a saloon in Fort Sumner. Grant had been loudly boasting that he would kill the kid if he ever saw him, unaware that the man he was playing poker with was Billy himself. At the time, it was common practice to load only 5 bullets into a 6-shooter revolver, leaving one chamber empty under the hammer to prevent accidental discharge, since many revolvers lacked safeties. According to legend, Billy asked to see Grant's ivory-handled revolver. While examining it, he discreetly rotated the cylinder so that the hammer would fall on the empty chamber. He then revealed his identity. When Grant tried to fire, nothing happened, giving Billy the chance to draw and shoot him 3 times. Later, when asked about the incident, Billy simply remarked, "Well, he won't shoot me again." In November 1880, a posse member named James Carlisle entered a house under a white flag, attempting to negotiate the surrender of Billy the Kid's gang. Earlier, on November 1st, another posse member, Deputy Greathouse, had been sent inside as a hostage to guarantee safe conduct for the talks. As the night wore on, Carlisle began to suspect that the outlaws were stalling. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out from outside, accidental or otherwise. Fearing that the posse had killed Greathouse, Carlisle panicked and tried to escape, crashing through a window into the snow. In the confusion, the posse mistook him for one of the outlaws and shot him dead. Realizing their tragic mistake, the posse became demoralized and scattered, allowing McCarty and his gang to slip away. Later, McCarty wrote to Governor Lew Wallace, claiming he had no part in Carlisle's death or in cattle rustling in general. At the time, the Kid became friends with Pat Garrett, a local bartender and former buffalo hunter. Garrett ran for sheriff promising to crack down on rustlers, and he won the election in November of 1880. Not long after, he formed a posse to go after Billy the Kid, who had a $500 bounty on his head from the governor. Garrett's posse moved quickly. On December 19th, they nearly caught Billy in Fort Sumner, but he managed to escape. One of his men, Tom O'Folliard, was shot and killed during the ambush. A few days later, the posse tracked Billy and his gang to an old stone building in a remote spot called Stinking Springs. They waited outside until morning. At sunrise, Charlie Beaudre, one of Billy's close friends, stepped out to feed the horses. The posse mistook him for Billy and shot him. Shortly after, someone inside reached for the halter rope. Garrett fired again, this time hitting the horse, which collapsed and blocked the only exit. Garrett and the gang started cooking breakfast over a fire. Garrett invited Billy to come out and eat. Billy told him to go to hell, but it was clear there was no way out. Hungry and surrounded, Billy and his gang gave up later that day and even joined the lawmen for breakfast. On April 13th, Billy was sentenced to hang. His execution was set for May 13th, and he was sent to Lincoln to wait it out. He was kept on the top floor of the courthouse under the watch of 2 deputies, James Bell and Robert Ollinger. But Billy had no intention of going quietly. One day, he shot Bell, who staggered outside and collapsed. Billy then grabbed Ollinger's shotgun and waited by the upstairs window. As Ollinger rushed back, Billy called out, "Hello, Bob," and shot him dead. Nearly 3 months passed. Rumors spread that Billy was hiding near Fort Sumner. On July 14, 1881, Garrett and 2 deputies headed there to investigate. Late that night, Garrett was talking with Pedro Maxwell, one of Billy's friends, inside Maxwell's dark bedroom. That's when Billy walked in. He didn't recognize Garrett in the dark and pulled his gun, asking in Spanish, "Who is it? Who is it?" Garrett knew that voice. He drew his own pistol and fired. The first shot hit Billy just above the heart, killing him instantly. Billy the Kid was buried the next day in Fort Sumner's old military cemetery, next to his friends Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Beaudre. A single headstone was placed over the grave, but it's been stolen and recovered several times since the 1940s. Today, the whole gravesite is protected by a steel cage.